Hi guys, and welcome to our final day of reading about our artist of the month, Stevie Wonder. We kind of ended off last week with him being a teenager. Today, because it's the last day and we still have a lot of this book left, we're going to jump forward a couple chapters to when he's already a star. And we're going to kind of learn about how that worked out for him and how Stevie Wonder actually worked really hard to make a positive change in the world. Because as we're going to see in a little bit here, Stevie Wonder and MLK Jr. actually have like a big tie together. So let's kind of see what could Stevie Wonder have to do with Martin Luther King Jr.? They are like way different ages. So let's check it out. Chapter 6, Superstar. Ever since he was a teenager, Stevie's music had been popular with a broad audience, both black and white. With Music of My Mind, Stevie's fan base grew even larger. In 1972, he went on tour with the Rolling Stones, one of the most popular rock and roll bands in the world. Stevie was the opening act, which is the performer who plays before the main attraction. But it wasn't long before Mick Jagger, the lead singer of the Rolling Stones, was bringing Stevie back on stage to join him in singing Satisfaction, one of the group's biggest hits. So Mick Jagger was also one of the most famous people in the world at the time, but they were from two completely different genres. Stevie sings R&B, kind of like a funk sound, R&B sound, and Mick Jagger is a rock and roll star. So it's kind of interesting to see that these two huge stars from completely different genres toured together. It's pretty cool. The crowd loved Stevie, maybe a little bit too much. Some of the tour's organizers thought he was taking too much attention from the Stones, but Mick insisted that Stevie stay. On stage, they were a good mix. Off stage, they were very different. The Rolling Stones often had parties filled with things that they shouldn't have been doing. Stevie did not do those things. These things, mixed with violence and crime, were on the rise in the 70s, especially in big cities in the United States. Stevie felt those were important issues to address, and he wanted his music to be a part of that conversation. So instead of doing negative things and using your influence in a way that isn't so positive, Stevie wanted to make sure that he was using his influence in a way that bettered the world. That was really a big thing for him. He began writing more about the reality of racism and poverty. His next album, Talking Book, showed the world that an R&B artist could appeal to audiences that usually listen to rock music. So this is in like the 1970s, so this is about 10 years after Martin Luther King and the Civil Rights Movement, but these things, like these issues of racism and poverty, still lingered very, very heavily because it takes a long time for such large issues to really fizzle out and become truly equal. So these things were still lingering and really impacting people. Talking Books, You Are the Sunshine of My Life, was a love song that soared to #1 on the charts and earned Stevie a Grammy Award. The award is given each year by the National Academy of Recording Arts and Sciences for outstanding performances in music. A Grammy is basically the biggest award that you can get in music. Superstition, a funky, high-energy song that we've listened to before, went to #1 too and won 2 Grammys. Talking Book included a message from Stevie to his fans, written in Braille on the cardboard cover. Here is my music, it read. It is all I have to tell you how I feel. Know that your love keeps my love strong. The album was a huge hit for Stevie. So what he means when he wrote it in Braille is that on the cover of this album, so like kind of like in the slip that the disc actually comes in, he had it like stamped out in Braille. And if you don't know what Braille is how blind people read. There's raised little bumps that they can feel. And by the sense of touch, they're able to read. So he wrote a message for his fans in Braille because, we know that Stevie is blind, that said that this is my music, I hope that you like it, which is very cool. Just a year later, Stevie released an album called Inner Visions. Its most memorable song was Living for the City, about a black man from the South who moves to New York City and is arrested and sentenced to 10 years in jail. The song used noise from the street, traffic and sirens and voices to bring the sounds of the city directly into the story. Living for the City was a #1 hit on the R&B chart. So was Higher Ground, another song on the album. In August 1973, just 3 days after Inner Visions was released, Stevie was involved in a terrible car accident. On his way to a concert in North Carolina, a log fell off of a truck and crashed through the windshield of the car in which Stevie was riding. It hit him in the face. Stevie spent several days in a coma and nearly passed away. No one was sure if he would ever be able to write, sing, or play music again. So there was a truck carrying logs in front of his car, and one of the logs fell off and it hit Stevie in the face inside of his car, which is horrible, really scary, right? But the accident didn't lessen Stevie's passion for music or his positive outlook on life. I expect that from Stevie. That's great. Anyone who has had such an event never looks at life quite the same way, he said. It felt like it was a second chance at life. He wasn't about to let that go to waste. Only 1 month after the accident, Stevie made a brief appearance at an Elton John concert. And in March 1974, he returned to the stage for an emotional concert at Madison Square Garden in New York City. Stevie's already successful career reached its own higher ground in the months that followed. Innervisions won the Grammy for Album of the Year in 1973. That's kind of one of the best Grammys that you could possibly get. Then his next album won Album of the Year in 1974. Then he won it again in 1976. Songs in the Key of Life is considered to be one of the best albums of all time. It is preserved in the Library of Congress's National Recording Registry for its historical significance. On the album, Stevie continued to address issues of racism and poverty with songs such as Black Man and Village Ghetto Land. But he also wrote songs about people who inspired him. Sir Duke is a tribute to the jazz legend Duke Ellington. So, he actually ended up in the Library of Congress. When you hear the word Congress, you probably think about the government, right? That's exactly what that is. The Library of Congress is basically this huge library with historical documents, records, all that good jazz in it. So his album made such a huge impact for being so pivotal in terms of race issues and just being very inspiring in general that it ended up in the Library of Congress for like all of history. Amazing. Stevie recorded most of the songs in the Key of My Life in Hollywood. He wasn't on the road performing. He spent most of his time there. He wanted his mother closer to him, so he bought Lula a large home nearby. He also had a daughter with his girlfriend Yolanda. Isn't She Lovely? One of the most popular songs from Songs in the Key of Life was Stevie's tribute to his baby girl Aisha. So this is him and this is his daughter. And I think that we listened to Isn't She Lovely together, and that's for his baby girl. When Stevie's contract with Motown ended in the late 1970s, he broke music industry records by re-signing with the label for a guaranteed $13 million to be paid over 7 years. His first 2 albums under the new contract made the expense worth it for Mr. Gordy. Stevie Wonder's Journey Through the Secret Life of the Plants reached number 4 on the R&B charts. Hotter Than July was number 1. So now we're going to kind of see, how does Stevie Wonder and Martin Luther King tie together? So we already talked about, he's obviously a big proponent for advocating to end racism, right? He's done a lot of work with that with his music. So he's going to tie directly with Martin Luther King Jr. here, and we're going to see how. Chapter 7, Making a Difference. Stevie's music reflected the things that were important to him. But in the 1980s, he began to take a more active role in those causes. He played concerts to support peace rallies. He protested against the South African system of racial segregation known as apartheid. So this is him protesting. He's protesting segregation in a different country in Africa. So we kind of learned about, last semester, we learned about John Legend being a big activist. Stevie Wonder is similar in that way. Stevie even made goodwill visits to foreign countries to help raise money for many different charities. Stevie felt especially strong about one particular issue. That's Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday should become a national holiday. Many other people did too, but several tries at creating the holiday had failed. So this is before Martin Luther King Jr. Day was an actual holiday. Obviously it's a holiday now because we have school off on Monday for it, but this was before it was actually declared a holiday by the government. So he was a big fan of, this needs to be a holiday, this is so important. So the cause was so important to Stevie that in the early 1980s he put much of his music career on hold and spent his time trying to convince politicians to support the holiday. In 1981 he released a single called Happy Birthday. In Happy Birthday, Stevie sang, "I just never understood how a man who died for good could not have had a day that would be set aside for his recognition." Stevie wondered how anyone could oppose creating a National Martin Luther King Jr. Day. Stevie gave performances and made speeches to support the national holiday. In 1981, he hosted a Rally for Peace press conference with civil rights leaders such as Reverend Jesse Jackson. In 1982, he led a rally in Washington on Dr. King's birthday that featured other stars such as singers Gladys Knight and Diana Ross. More than 50,000 people attended. Why should I be involved in this great cause? Stevie asked the crowd. As an artist, my purpose is to create and communicate the message that can better improve the lives of all of us. Stevie could have made much more money playing concerts and releasing new songs, but for Stevie, it was worth it to spend his time working on a day to honor Dr. King. His 4 years of hard work paid off when Congress finally passed a bill creating the holiday. President Ronald Reagan signed it into law on November 2nd, 1983. Now, with Dr. King's birthday officially a national holiday, Stevie went back to work on his music. So this is a little drawing here of President Reagan signing it into law that Martin Luther King Jr. Day would be a national holiday. So, isn't that crazy that the way that our Artist of the Month and our Holiday of the Month ties together is that Stevie fought for years to make sure that Martin Luther King Jr. Day was a national holiday. He was like, MLK Jr. did so much for our country. He is such a huge hero to our country, not only to people of African American descent, but to our whole country. He's so important. He's such a hero. Why would anyone not want to have a holiday for him? So he fought for that for years and years and years until it was finally signed into law. So he is not solely responsible. There was a lot of people advocating for it, but he had a huge part in actually making this holiday that we have school off for on Monday. Isn't that awesome? Kind of funny how things work like that, right? So that was our final visit with Stevie Wonder for the virtual learning school year. I'm going to have you guys listen to the song Happy Birthday now, so that way you can hear the song that he wrote talking about how Martin Luther King Jr. Day should be a holiday. I hope you guys have a great weekend, and I will see some of you on Tuesday. Bye.